Hi, I'm sitting here talking with a miracle named Professor Ervin Laszlo. I could go into all kinds of depth about who he is and the 2 times Nobel nomination and the 90 some odd books that he's written and the worldwide following that he has and being a forerunner in the field of consciousness, but I'm not going to talk about that, and we're not going to do this interview in Sanskrit, even though Professor Laszlo was gracious enough to offer. I really want to ask 2 questions of you, Ervin. The first one is, we are in what I would call a global identity crisis. It's almost like World War III, World War Me, or shall we say World War We. And it seems like the 3 tectonic plates are rubbing up against each other. Globalism, nationalistic identity, and individual identity, which comprises this identity crisis and this great struggle amongst people and nations and an entire world. How, history repeats itself. We have wonderful talks and conferences and so much learning that goes on worldwide, and yet here we are at the precipice of yet another global crisis. So history is repeating itself. How do we demonstrably change the paradigm this time? Not just conceptually, but experientially.
First of all, on the level of concepts, this kind of tectonic plates that you're talking about, they are not shouldn't be rubbing against each other. They should be complementing each other. Because after all, when you have a system that has diversity, it also can have unity. But when it has diversity, it doesn't mean that its elements are fighting each other. When you have a global identity, it's not against the national identity, because the national identity is part of the global system. And the individual identity is not against the national identity. Saying that it is sort of like saying that your identity of your lung cells are fighting the identity of your liver cells,
Exactly.
Because we're all part of the same organism. And this organism is diverse. It has more than one kind in it. And it all works together. That's the beauty of it. We are not a uniform, just heap of the same thing, a lot of stones put together. We are a working, living organism that can evolve. And all we have to remember that this organism is not limited either just to us or to a family or even to our country. This organism is now extending all over humanity. All of humanity is part of it. We're all cells of this organism. That doesn't mean that we are swallowed up in it and that therefore we lose our identification of who we are. No, just the same way as in a living body, every cell keeps its identity but cooperates with the others. That's what we have to find. Now we have to think of ourselves as being a self-referential, self-knowing part of a larger system, something that is operating within the context. We have moved from the level of the tribe, from the small village, and even the empire that built around it, and the nation-states are all now basically going down in history. We are moving toward a global system. We are already in a global system. And the crisis is the crisis of identity because we don't understand that we have the same identity, the identity of a diverse system that can evolve through the cooperation of its parts. It's a privilege to be a part of this system, and we should try to remember that. We are not against the other. Together, the other, we can create a world that can evolve, that can flourish, and where each of its parts can flourish.
This is so critical because my question then is, and I agree with you, we're really part of a global body, but because we know that authority is almost allergic right now to the concept of this, well, I would say allergic to certain facets of this global versus individual concept. And I'm wondering if it's both a trickle-down and a trickle-up fusion where the people and the leadership somehow meets in the middle. But because so many nations are driven right now by leadership that is threatened by this concept of expansive, all-encompassing, and is marrying more and more to their nationalistic identity, for fear, I suppose.
Yes.
How do we reconcile that with the authority right now and the leadership that's still very much in place?
It's a very nice example from population biology. You see, how does a species, population evolve? It used to be thought that these people at the center, the dominant elements, change, and therefore the change penetrates outwards. It's just the opposite. The dominant elements, at least in a natural population ecosystem, they don't change. They die out, and they get atrophied because they are no longer capable of survival. The change comes from below. Change comes from the periphery and moves to the center, or comes from below and moves up, if you like. And the change factors, the hope factors today in this world, are the new cultures that are growing up around us. New thinking that is coming. This can spread very fast because the internet is there to spread our ideas, our ideals, our values, our behavior patterns, all that. The technologies are there that can serve this. Also, it can serve any culture, basically. You have culture, technology is a servant. It needs to be treated as a servant to realize what we want to do, what we want to achieve. But it's possible, it's a very good servant. It's a very powerful agent. So we could have a global system, but the impetus has to come from someplace. It will come from the periphery. It comes from people. We have to talk, address the mind of people are already opening up, waking up. And this big global awakening is a fact. It's something that's happening. And something needs to be promoted, supported, because that's where the hope lies. The hope doesn't lie with the people on top who are worried about losing their privileges. They are not going to change in time. They will become obsolete only when this change around us in their supporters are changing. And they're no longer supported. There's no such absolute system with very small acceptance. In North Korea, that's number one, where leaders could survive without popular support. Every leader depends on the support of his or her followers. So that's where the change comes. Whom do we elect? Whom do we move behind? The leader has to not lead in a way of creating something new, but to pick up what is the positive element and then stand there and govern and hope to move it forward. The true leader serves the positive element in the world.
This is why I hope very much that global televisionary events like synchronicity and governance, new forms of governance like the simple movement can be birthed in these next very critical years. And I have a very perhaps unusual question to ask you. Basically, we're all born without a conscious choice, or a user manual for that matter, and we kind of are born onto the stage of life to wing it. So knowing what you know now about life, if you had the conscious choice this time around to choose to be born, knowing what you know, would you choose to be born?
It's a very exciting time. It's very little that you can do as an individual when the system is stable around you. You either work with it or you get selected out. But when the system is unstable and it's on this cusp of changing because it can't stay the way it is, then the selection of which way it goes, then you need a very small so-called critical mass. You only need a small group of people, as Margaret Mead said, who can change the world. Yes, a small group of people can change the world if the world is unstable and is ready for change. And the world has been destabilized, and that's the opening, that's the overture to change. We need to govern only to give a direction so that people realize what is in their true interest as living beings on a living planet. How we can live so we can all live on this planet. We can all flourish and evolve together. If people begin to realize this on a level of a critical mass, this idea will spread because it's in us. Intuitively we know it. We know what's good for us. We must be allowed to recognize this and to act accordingly.
Nature and human nature, essentially.
Cosmic nature. Even.
Cosmic nature.
We are cosmic beings. History is the evolution of the cosmos.
Fascinating. I'm going to leave us with two phrases. One is, synchronicity is televisionary, and the other one is, and I'd like you to say this with me, first in English, then in Sanskrit, let's get synced. Okay, we say it together at the same time. Let's get synced.
Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Let's get synced.